Aujourd'hui, je vais parler de whether people are getting inflation-based raises or just generally enough raises, and whether that should actually be a question to worry about at all, especially if your goal is to retire early. Right. Hey, Zempak here. As you guys know, I don't have a real job these days. No active or earned income as the United States government defines it. But I know that most people are still stuck in that world, right? And I guess mostly out of necessity. So I see a persistent question that shows up on the FIRE Facebook group, and that's whether current employees are getting raises in this current inflationary environment, right? I'll touch on whether that's likely the case or not, but more importantly, try to convince you guys that hoping for that raise in any format is still a fool's errand more often than not. Anyway, if you don't mind my rants, please comment, like, and subscribe or whatever. Don't really matter to me one bit. So number one, right? First of all, I'm not sure how often raises are actually being broken down at companies into inflation-based versus merit-based, right? I think the bigger companies do spell it out, but I recall being at smaller and mid-sized companies, the managers simply do not tell you which part of the raise is due to what reason, right? If you get a raise, just be happy, right? The lack of transparency is concerning, but not a deal breaker. After all, most people are simply happy to get any raise, right? But the real issue when we talk about inflation-based raises, well, which metric of inflation should a thing be based on, right? Just look at the past few months to a year. Inflation has surged in a very relatively short amount of time, right? Quick Google search shows you inflation during 2021 was around 4.7%. Yeah, just in the first 2 months of 2022, it has surged to 7.9%, and that's before whatever effects of banning Russian oil will have on energy prices, right? So I think the last raise anyone would have gotten would be at the stage of late 2021, right? Do I realistically think that last year employees across the country was getting an almost 5% raise just based on inflation alone? Nah, hell no. There's no chance at all that happened. Okay. Recall this is before any merit-based adjustments. So a realistic number for a good or great employee should then, be on top of the inflation-based raise of 5%. Raising it to almost 7 to 10%, that's just not a cost adjustment the vast majority of companies would actually take on. Okay. Number two, let's also remember why inflation is happening to begin with, right? Broken supply chains around the globe, uneven recovery from the pandemic at that macro level, and the most recent European war happening, of course. Plus, demand in at least the West is surging due to the repressed spending from that 2 whole years of pandemic. All this adds up to additional costs and the ability for companies to charge more money for the same products, right? The reality is that they don't have to pay their employees more. I know they aren't. If they were prioritizing their employees, this whole great resignation thing wouldn't be happening, right? People are leaving in droves because they finally understand that they don't have to just take it from the employers. And yet companies are still losing talent left and right because their culture of simply minimizing cost at all costs has been so ingrained in their minds that it's really difficult to change that mentality suddenly, right? So now they'll find out the huge cost of actually hiring and retaining talent, right? The larger the company, the slower any change will occur. So how do I expect somehow companies who are used to nickel and diming their employees at every corner to suddenly be generous and possibly just pay people what would essentially be on par pay rather than simply let their effective pay slip due to inflation? Yeah, that's not going to happen, okay? Because the main way companies make more profits is keeping costs as low as possible, right? That's just economics 101. Point number 3, and finally, I'm going to go off the rails and really rant a bit. The reality is that the only leverage any employee has is to go get another offer. Without that, companies do not have to even keep up your effective pay, as we mentioned, right? Because inflation changes very quickly, especially with a major international conflict going on. The reason most people are employees instead of entrepreneurs is for stability, right? Just like we wouldn't want our paycheck to take a dive of any kind when inflation is not happening, right? When perhaps prices are falling a bit. We can't expect paychecks to actually mirror inflation either on the reverse side, right? Companies know that they have our balls in their hands because stability comes with well, a price or some sort of compromise or sacrifice right now, right? And right now, that sacrifice is that you trade oscillating effective pay for some semblance of stability. Usually, I'd say that the larger the company that your employer is, the greater amount of stability your pay will have, right? But the more stable the pay remains, the more likely you're going to get screwed because your pay is actually dropping in this high inflationary environment. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, you can just go start your own business and swerve with the monetary policies of the land as much as you want, but hey, that takes the kind of spirit that not everybody has, right? So if you're not that brave as to totally do your own thing, then forget about always wondering if your pay is going to keep up with inflation, right? I can tell you the answer. It is not going to keep up with inflation because companies can generally estimate that enough employees simply do not have the gumption to do anything about it, okay? So, in conclusion, I mean, sure, I remember getting raises. It was nice to get them. But I remember our inflation-adjusted amount was always around 2% at most. Does that sound right for the entire last decade? At least when I had a job. Seems a bit low, but I didn't care because I wasn't working for those raises. I was working for stocks that I was getting. Because I was at a giant tech company, right? And those stocks were much more effective at increasing my wealth. I know that's an exception rather than a rule, but my point is, if you are one of those people who are even asking the question, oh boy, is my pay keeping up with inflation, then I'd suggest, looking deeper and trying to see if you can cultivate that sense of bravery, an inner drive to really go out and do your own thing. Because let me tell you, what you're not going to be able to accomplish is change the entire culture of anything above a small mom and pop enterprise. Because how these larger companies view their employees, it's stuck in the past, right? It's not going to change, right? The vast majority of companies view employees as expendable resources, not true priorities. Again, the proof is in the continued existence of this current great resignation period, okay? That's happening right now, so think about it. I hope you'll decide to take matters into your own hands instead. Cheers. I'll approach it.